Okay, hopefully that told you recording was in progress. Welcome everybody. Delighted to have you all here today. I know we've got some familiar faces and some new people too, and that's wonderful. So first of all, I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Amanda Chuke. I'm a freelance nature writer, and I'm currently nature writer in residence in the Great Northwood, which is an area of South London. And it's in partnership with the London Wildlife Trust. My residency is funded by Arts Council England, which means that I can host these free workshops. So that's wonderful. And we've got another 2 to go after this one. So hopefully some of you can come to those as well. And I wanted to particularly introduce my co-lead for today's workshop, Anita Roy. Anita is a writer, editor and environmentalist, and she's one of the Guardian country diarists. So welcome, Anita.
Thank you very much, Amanda. It is very, very exciting to be here. Yeah, and the other thing to say about both Amanda and I is that we both did a MA in travel and nature writing at Bath Spa University. I think I graduated the year before you, Amanda, was it?
I'm just graduating now, so perhaps a couple of years.
You're just graduating now. Oh, you're a baby.
Absolutely.
So I graduated a few years ago. It's a really, really wonderful course. It's a lot of fun to do. And I think for both of us, it kind of kick-started our nature writing, just kind of coming more into the center of our lives, I guess, and gave us the confidence to do all kinds of things. I don't think that I would have become a Guardian country diary writer if I hadn't already done that course. I think it was really good at kind of connecting you to things. Out of that course, I also did a nature diary kind of little book called A Year in Kinkham, about a wildflower meadow in Dorset that was rather wonderful to go and visit every year. And from that, I don't have a book, but I have a postcard of a book that's just come out, which is also it's kind of a nature almanac. So it traces the changing seasons through the year, which is with a whole bunch of other writers of diverse backgrounds, which has just come out with Hodder and Stoughton. So I thought I'd just get a quick plug in for that, because that's exciting stuff.
Thank you, Anita. Well, everybody, please make yourselves comfortable, and we're going to take you through some gentle and relaxing exercises for your creative writing muscles. So let's kick off. So the plan, we're going to do 3 short writing exercises, and then we'll have a 5 to 10 minute break at around 11:50, and then there'll be a final slightly longer writing exercise. Followed by a bit of summing up of what we've done today, and next steps. So the plan is to finish promptly at 12:30, so hopefully that works for everybody. As I've said, we are recording it, so if you don't want to appear, obviously turn off your video. We only have a few of you on screen at the moment, so most of you probably wouldn't appear anyway. But just before I go any further, what's nature writing? Well, some of you have been to many of these, so you've heard me say this quite a few times, but there's lots of different ways you can define nature writing. It can be creative non-fiction, it can be fiction, it can be prose, it can be poetry. What it usually is writing about the natural world, and often the writer's place in it. And it can be anything from very short writing, which we're going to try out today, to book length. And probably somebody will write multi-books at some point, but anyway, so that's a definition of nature writing, and I'm sure if you had any other nature writers on here today, they'd all give you a slightly different one. So there's no rules, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So we're going to get straight in to actually getting you doing some nature writing. So one of the ways that nature writers can make their writing compelling is by taking a different view of something very familiar, which if you did the pre-workshop activity, that was one of the things that we asked you to look at, something very familiar. Hence the title of this one, Common or Garden Magic. So we're going to start off with an easy warm-up. What we're going to ask you to do is to write a description of any object in the room where you are at the moment. So it's ideally one that you can see at the moment, preferably not your laptop, although it could be, I suppose, but that could be a bit dull if they're all about laptops. But what we want you to do is to write about it as if you were seeing it for the very first time and you don't know what it is or what it does. So it's having a kind of new way of looking at this. Imagine you've never seen it before, you're seeing it today for the first time, and I just want you to write about it. So you've got about 5 minutes to do that. There's no rules on how long it has to be, but it's seeing it for the very first time. What I'm going to do now is mute and give you 5 peaceful minutes to work on that. You have about a minute left. Okay. So hopefully that's started warming up your writing, and it'll make the next few exercises a little bit easier. So what I did forget to say, which would have been useful perhaps before that exercise, is that we are going to be using the chat function today. So I keep an eye on that while you're working on exercises. So if you have any questions about anything we're doing, post them on the chat and I will do my best to answer them. So I'm going to hand over to Anita at this point for the next section. Over to you, Anita.
So one of the things that we do as writers is that we, like kind of magpies, grab stuff from other people's writing, and the shinier and the more effective the better. So you can learn an awful lot about what makes writing compelling, fun to read, exciting to do by reading as widely as you possibly can, and not just nature writing, but any writing. Because reading stuff with your writer's brain on makes you think about sentence structures, about how a paragraph is put together, about imagery, what works, what doesn't. You suddenly find yourself kind of developing your spidey sense about what's a cliche, what isn't. So it helps you to look out for those kinds of things in your own writing. So here we've got examples of 4 different really ultra short bits of nature writing, each of which, as I'm reading them out, I'd like you to think about and listen to with your writer's brain on, as opposed to your everyday brain or your reader's brain. So just have a think while I'm reading out each piece, what works, what doesn't, what you might learn from that, and how you might use some of those things in your own writing. So the first one is by Gurnam Bubba, which is frankly a fantastic name to start with. So there's that. Who is a poet and storyteller. The woodpeckers flash red knowingly. First drum roll for spring. The renewed kid on the block exploding onto the scene again. What a kid! A wildly frenetic, cocky, lime green, not just sap rising, but a cork popping, zingy, punkish clarion call to beat out the rhythm of our genes. The second one is by a fellow country diarist for The Guardian, Paul Evans. All ear and eye, the rabbit was as alert as an exclamation mark. It remained still and watchful, as if it thought it was invisible, when in fact its attention was so intense it seemed as obvious as a warning beacon in an otherwise languid August afternoon. The third one I wrote for the latest country diary about a month ago, about Himalayan balsam, which, if you don't know, I hope that this gives you a sort of sense of what they're like, this weird plant. At this point in the year, the seed pods of Himalayan balsam are primed and ready, grenades with their pins already out. Each pendant of striped yellow-green is pregnant with seeds, lined up like Trojan soldiers in the belly of a horse, jittery, keyed up, just waiting for you to brush past. And the final one is from a fantastic writer who you may know, called Amanda Chuke. And I love this little bit. So 3 parakeets eating crab apples, peck, spit, maybe this bit is nice, maybe this bit will be nicer, or this bit, or even this bit, or perhaps this one, or that one, or the one over there. Now look, you lot, they're sour, damn it. They're always going to be sour. Give it up. So each of those little bits of writing has not only got a lot of imagery in it, so metaphors and descriptive words and onomatopoeic words. It's also got a lot of punctuation. Not a lot of people think about punctuation as being sort of like a very fundamental part of writing. It's kind of what you need in order to make things make sense. But actually, punctuation, I think, is more like it's more like spice. It's more like, I mean, I'm from an Indian background, so I use a lot of what we call masala. So cumin and jeera is cumin, other things. Without the spice, you ain't got no flavor to your dish. In the first, in Gurnham Bobber's piece, we have one exclamation mark. What a kid, he says. Exclamation marks are really great to use in texts, but you have to use them really, really sparingly in written work, because they're a bit like chilies. You know, they will overwhelm everything else because they're quite punchy and powerful. In the second one, in Paul Evans' section, we actually have him talking about a rabbit as an exclamation mark. And I think that all ear and eye, that rabbit was alert as an exclamation mark is, I mean, it's such a powerful sentence. It's such a beautiful sentence. There is not a single bit of that sentence that you can lose. And that was something I read in 2016 once in The Guardian. And ever since then, it has stayed in my head as a sentence, because it's so perfect. You can see, like, and you suddenly look at exclamation marks like they're rabbits with their ears up and their eye at the bottom. And it's almost like why didn't I think about it? I spend the rest of my life going, oh God, if only I could come up with an image and a sentence as short and immediately evocative as that. Fantastic. So maybe if we move on to the second exercise, Amanda, would you, if you think back to the pre-workshop activity, was just to spend some time with something, whether it was a plant or an animal or a fungi or whatever it was, a living thing, and just just spend some time with it, look at it, observe it, let it tell you what it is. If you manage to do that and you want to go back to that object, thing, living creature, whatever it was, please do for this. Or if you didn't manage to do that, you can also do this exercise about anything else, quite honestly. All we want you to do is to spend about 10 minutes with your chosen thing. I don't want to call it an object, actually, because one of the lovely things about nature writing is that you're really dealing with living beings. It could be a plant, it could be a blade of grass, it could be a woodlouse. The exciting and challenging thing, I think, is that when you're writing about nature, when you're writing about the natural world, you suddenly realize that living creature has its own subjectivity. It has its own life. It's sensing you as much as you are sensing it. That's what makes it alive. That's what makes it natural. So unlike your laptop, which appears to be sensing you because it's got an eye and it's got a texture and all of that stuff, and we can see each other and communicate through it, it ain't living. It's not a natural object. Whereas that fungi in the picture has its whole own life history. So, sorry, I need to stop speaking and let you get down to writing. But with that in mind, switch on all of your senses. What's that object telling you in terms of its smell, its texture? We tend to write descriptions with our eyes because that's the most because often that feels like what a description is. It's what does something look like? But what we'd like you to do is listen to the living thing that you are writing about and find out what it's telling you it does or feels like or smells like, or all of those nice living things that are what we have bodies for. So 10 minutes starting now.
It's just worth saying, I think, that we're after a straightforward description here. We're not asking you to be brilliantly creative. We'll have time for that, but this is a straightforward description. I think there's about a minute to go. Is that right, Anita?
It's not.
Okay, so if you wouldn't mind stopping there, and we're going to move on to the next, changing to the next slide.
Okay, before you click on the next slide, let me just talk about the next slide.
Okay.
Yeah. So I just want to say that the reason that we wanted to call this session Common or Garden Magic is partly because Amanda and I were talking about how to spark a kind of sense of awe and wonder in the ordinary, putting the awe back into the ordinary. That's what we should have called it, but that putting the awe into ordinary. So I want to share two little mini stories with you. One is that Tim Smith, who was the brains behind the Eden Project down in Cornwall, which some of you might know about, wrote a fantastic foreword to a book by about an environmental artist whose name I'm completely blanking, but anyway. This artist, who's an environmental artist based in Cornwall, said, Tim, I can guarantee I will change your life if you give me an hour of your time. Tim said, yep, go for it. He took an empty picture frame about this big into the garden, put it on the lawn, sat Tim Smith down next to it and said, just look at that for an hour. And Tim Smith talks about it, like for the first 5 minutes, he's incredibly annoyed with his friend. For the next 10 minutes, he's incredibly bored. And then his friend says to him, look at this piece of grass as though something, I think he uses the word tremendous, as though something tremendous and dangerous is about to erupt from its green heart. At which point, all his kind of senses went on to alert. If you look at anything as though it's about to erupt in a slightly dangerous but fascinating way, it is guaranteed to reveal something of itself, which is interesting. I think that's the thing. It's like the quality of attention that you bring to even the most boring object or thing will change what that thing has a chance to mean. So that was one little rather wonderful, it's almost like a parable that I wanted to share with you. And the second one is just because part of the joy of being in nature writing, or being a writer really, is being able to enthuse publicly about books that you like. And a book that I was gifted by a friend recently that I just completely fell in love with is a book about a wild snail. Now, snails are not very, I mean, we tend to overlook them or squash them or step on them or think that they're boring. And this little book The Sound of a Wild Snail Eating by Elizabeth Tover Bailey is fantastic. It's the exact illustration of what Common or Garden Magic Workshop is all about, really. So Elizabeth Tover Bailey was laid up with a very debilitating ME-like illness. For several years, she was more or less confined to her bed. One day, a friend of hers brings in a flower pot from the garden and says, I found a snail in the woods. I brought it back and it's right here beneath the violets. You did? Why did you bring it in? I don't know. I thought you might enjoy it. Is it alive? She picked up the brown acorn-sized shell and looked at it. I think it is. Why, I wondered, would I enjoy a snail? What on earth would I do with it? I couldn't get out of bed to return it to the woods. It was not of much interest, and if it was alive, the responsibility, especially for a snail, something so uncalled for, was overwhelming. And the rest of the book is just about what she found to enjoy in a snail. And here is the sound of the snail eating. The snail consumed an entire slice of portobello, that's a mushroom, every week. As I watched it eat, I noticed that it nodded its head gently up and down. Did this mean that it approved of its dinner? When I examined what remained of the mushroom after it had dined, I could see a pattern of fresh teeth marks, very fine little vertical striations, as if made by a tiny comb. Half the fun of having a snail as a companion was that it kept finding new sleeping places, so there was an ongoing game of hide and seek in the terrarium. The creature seemed to defy physics. It moved over the very tips of mosses without bending them, and it could travel straight up the stem of a fern and then continue upside down along the frond's underside. It could perch on the very edge of the mussel shell, and from this precarious position, reach casually across open space to eat some of the mushroom without failing or spilling the water from the shell. Beautifully observed, and you get the sense that this snail is not just any snail. It is an individual with its own kind of quirks and characteristics and personality. So, Amanda, should we go on to the next exercise?
Absolutely. So, to build on exercise 2, return to the living being that you were writing about for exercise in exercise 2, but in this case, we want you to treat it completely differently. So, the first thing we'd like you to do is to give the thing that you spent time with a new name. A better name, a more exciting name, but a new name. And to write about it truthfully, in other words, don't make up things that it did or smelt of or looked like, but this time try and convey your wonder in it in the same way that you'd heard previously from those writers. And one way of doing that is perhaps to think of it like an extract from a children's story. When I wrote that, what I was thinking about, and I don't know if you've read Fantastic Beasts by J.K. Rowling, but there's something about the way that she introduces in all of her writing new creatures that she has invented, but she creates the most incredible sort of wonder in those creatures. So I had it seemed only fair that I had a go at this. So there's a little bit of writing that I did about a blue tit, which for those of you who live in the UK, you'll know is a very common bird. But I always think it has the most boring name. So I would say, right, give it a new name. We're going to call it an azure pole, because they do have most beautiful blue heads, which you can see. I quite often have them perching right outside my window on a rose bush there. And you can really appreciate the beautiful blue catching the sunlight. But anyway, so I had a little go writing about that as if it was a creature that I was trying to explain the awe in it to a child. So we'd like you to have a go at that. As we said, if you have any questions, post them in the chat and I'll have a go at answering. And you've got about 10 minutes to do this. So over to you. So you've got about a minute to go. Okay, everybody. I think you've more than earned a break. So we're going to stop now and then start again at 12 o'clock midday. So while you're before you disappear, if you'd like to share anything you've written today so far on the chat, we'd love to see it. And when we start again, Anita will pick out a few things that she'd like to share with you. So as I said, we're going to start again at 12 o'clock. So see you then. Welcome back, folks. Hopefully we've got Anita there. Yes, wonderful. So I'm going to hand over to Anita for the next section, and I think you're going to have a look at the chat. Anita, I think you're going to have a tough job choosing things from the chat. You're muted at the moment.
Wow, these are really good. These are really good. I love it. I love it. The it's really hard to pick. Oh my goodness. And also, yeah, there's lots. Gosh, you've done some fantastic work here. I love the name Star Capturer. They're round as pom-poms, but not nearly as fluffy. Green flesh like a frog. Ooh, this dangerous armor is beautiful to look at. I love that. I have no idea what it is. Nina, what the heck are you talking about? Can you unmute yourself and let us know? What is it? What is
it was a cactus.
A cactus. A cactus.
Yeah.
Wow. A galaxy of stars. I love it. Thank you so much. The park whale for a holm oak is also brilliant. Tapered acorns with knitted cap pulled down halfway. I love that. And the pointed chin, that's really nicely observed. iPad, I almost prefer spammy soft leather than chamois or chamois. It's
That's me, Gloria. That's me, Gloria.
Hello, Gloria. Hello, Gloria.
Hello, Sammy.
Spammy soft leather. I don't know. I read that and went, I don't even know what that is, but I kind of like it. Sometimes those little malapropisms or mistakes trip something in your mind. I don't know. I loved it anyway. Spammy soft leather bodice, unashamedly showing off their virgin white petticoat gills. And presumably you're talking about a mushroom of some sort.
Yes.
If I was a snail, I would just eat that up. And Parv, I really liked the weirdness of your punctuation or lack of it.
Thank you. Yes.
It was great. And it did actually, the speck or the splodge shouting, "Here I am," was brilliant. I thought.
It's a spider.
Really, really nice. A spider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's called Gossamer, please.
It is like poetic prose. And it kind of has a forward momentum, which I think is really nice for the reader to just kind of be carried along with. And that's what happens when you have little or no punctuation. It's like swimming. You're not quite sure where you're going to end up.
Okay.
We quite enjoy the journey.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Jane, your shapeshifter also had me inquisitive as to what it was I was imagining.
It was the roe deer.
It's the roe deer. I was thinking, is this a fox? Is it? No, it's got hooves. Is it? You know, I really like this exercise because as a reader, when you're reading a bit of nature writing or even a description, you're quite often trying to catch up with your imagination. Your naming brain is trying to catch up with your visual brain. So shapeshifter doesn't linger long. Its fur is coarse but soft as melted marshmallows, which I really like as a description because it's so weird. Often walking towards you rather than away, nose high. And I'm thinking, my brain is kind of going, is it a fox? Is it a bird? Is it a bee? Is it what does it look like? Does it when its ears are pointing in many directions, how many ears are we talking about? It's great. So in a way, tripping your or misdirecting your rational brain in this way by not naming the thing is a really useful way of allowing your creative brain the freedom to see things in a different way. I guess that's what it kind of comes down to. These are really, really brilliant. And I'm gonna, well, we're both going to, I think, have a lot of fun reading these properly afterwards. Amanda, would you like to carry on with the next exercise, or am I doing that? I can't remember.
I'm very happy to.
Okay.
So yes, so pulling everything together, everything we've done today. So we're going to have a slightly longer exercise now. So to produce, as we've done in the past, ask you to write 50 words. So a piece of thumbnail nature. Obviously, you can repurpose anything that's worked really well for you from exercise 2 and 3, or you could throw those out and start again. But as we said, so the only rule is that it must be no more than 50 words, and that includes, if you want a title, that has to be included in the 50 words too. So what I would encourage you to do in the next 20 odd minutes is to do your writing, read it aloud to yourself. I think there's something about, as Anita said earlier, there's something about these things working as oral pieces as well. Read it aloud, edit it, polish it, read it aloud again. Do as much of that as you can within the 20 minutes, and then I'll explain what we're hoping you're going to do with them after this workshop has finished. So over to you. I'll give you a sort of probably a 2-minute warning for this time, just so that you can finish off the bit you're working on. But once again, I'm going to shut up now and let you get on with it. So over to you.
Hello, Jane. You've got your hand raised. Did you want to ask a question? Oh, okay. I'll be quiet then. Do you want to lower your hand?
So you've got a couple of minutes left. Okay, deep breath, everybody, to kind of extract yourself from where you are. So I'm just going to, I think you all deserve fantastic big pat on the back, and we've been absolutely amazed by the quality of writing that we've seen already from the earlier exercises. So it's very exciting, the thought of seeing some of your final thumbnail nature pieces. But before we talk about that, just wanted to do a bit of a recap of what we've been doing today and pull out some tips that I think are always worth bearing in mind when you're doing nature writing. The first one is something that those of you who've done these before, you will have heard me drone on about at some length. I believe very strongly that the most compelling nature writing is rooted in the moment of experiencing nature, and so the kinds of exercises we get you to do or ask you to do for as pre-workshop activity is exactly that. It's getting out there and it's spending time really closely observing nature, and in the way that Anita referred to as well. The second tip is very much drawn from today. You've seen some amazing nature writing, which is about familiar organisms, but writing about them through fresh eyes and a renewed sense of wonder, because that can create magical writing. And then the final point you've also heard me saying a lot of times, and I'm afraid I'm going to carry on saying it, and it's something that I have to tell myself all the time as well, is that it's a good balance if you think you spend about a third of your time writing and then 2/3 editing and polishing it. And I know from bitter experience, if I don't invest at least that time, my writing suffers as a result of it. So it's a note to self not to rush off those tweets, because when I do, there's always mistakes in them. So I've learned from bitter experience. But anyway, so but yeah, and find joy in editing and polishing. It might be something that doesn't appeal to you to start off with, but there are ways of finding enjoyment in it. So what next? Well, if you'd like your piece of thumbnail nature, your 50 words or less, and it absolutely must be no more than 50 words, on the subject of common or garden magic, if you'd like it to be considered for an online anthology, which will be published on the London Wildlife Trust blog, please could you send me your final polished version, as I've said, maximum 50 words, including the title, if you want a title. And there's my email address So please make a note of that. And if I could please receive them by midnight tomorrow, because it's a magical time, let's face it, midnight. I usually get a few just before midnight, and I always find that quite exciting the next day to see that somebody was working on them then. But yeah, some people send them straight after the workshop, and a lot of those are beautiful, but it is really worth looking at it in the cold light of the next day and having a read through then and having a think about how it sounds a day later. So if you hadn't tried that before, I would encourage you to try that. So just to finish by saying thank you very much to all of you for being here. Amazing big thanks to Anita for co-hosting with me. I think you can all see why I was so excited about working with her. You've been amazing, Anita, and very inspiring, and I learn lots from you, and hope to carry on doing that.
Thank you so much, Amanda. It's been really, really fun. I've been blown away by the quality of the work and the excitingly different kinds of ideas and images that people are playing with. And I would just underline Amanda's brilliant 3 tips. Get out there and enjoy the first person joy of being in nature. Definitely, as an editor and someone who's spent her entire professional life polishing other people's work and my own, I know how valuable that second step is. But I also know that the first step of just putting pen to paper without your editor's hat on, without any sense that you need to create a beautiful piece of writing or an amazing work, and you're never going to be able to live up to that. I think quite often we stop ourselves from doing anything because we think it's not going to be good enough. This is a terrible, terrible way to start. I always set my bar really low and say, you know, if I can come up with a sentence, that's great. Wait, yay, that's like not just great, it's like a win. So don't censor yourself, I guess, is my added little bit of advice. Don't censor yourself before you started. The editor's hat is a wonderful thing, and it is invaluable at stage 2, 3, 4, 5, whenever. But when you first come to a piece of writing, give yourself absolute permission to write absolute shite for the first go. It's fine. Nobody's judging you, and it really just helps. It's like you know, I don't know, going for a run. I don't go for runs because I think I'm going to be really rubbish and it's going to hurt. But actually, you just need to get out there and do it a bit, and then do it a bit more, and then do it a bit more, and then find how much you enjoy it and continue. So
wonderful.
So yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much, Anita. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your lovely comments on the chat. Much appreciated, and look forward to seeing you hopefully in a couple of months. Take care.
Lovely.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.